Hello, dear listeners. Welcome to this new episode of my podcast, A Digital Tomorrow. I'm joined today again by Henri Arslanian, a very big expert, a very important voice on everything crypto, a very well-known global voice that I'm sure all of you already know. Henri was actually already on my podcast a couple of years ago, so it's great. It's an honor for me to be able to speak with you again.
Thanks, Oriol, for having me back. I'm excited to see your podcast doing so well, and thanks for having me and letting me share my passion of the future of money crypto with your listeners.
Now, again, thank you. I mean, it's an honor, and I'm sure that my listeners, all of them, will learn a lot from you. And well, I remember that last time we spoke, we focused more on cryptos in general, given that you are, an expert about everything crypto. But I think there are two topics that right now in 2025 are actually very, very hot. And these two topics are stable coins on one hand, and on the other hand, asset tokenization. So I would like to cover these two. And I would like to
Absolutely.
start first with stablecoins, because, well, I remember that a few years ago, perhaps this is my perception of that, but the stablecoin market was still quite small. And then to some people, they may not have been that interesting compared to other cryptos, but now it seems like everyone is talking about them. Actually, I was checking one of your shows recently in which you mentioned that the stablecoins market grew from I think it was 5 billion maybe in 2020 to well over 200 billion now, and according to some figures that you mentioned, it may even reach 250 billion. So if you could please explain to my audience, first of all, what's a stable coin, in case they don't know, and more importantly, why do you think this is happening? Why are we seeing these trends?
Absolutely, Oriol, and it's a great question, and you're absolutely right. We have seen tremendous growth in the stablecoin ecosystem, and this is a topic where I've been covering now stablecoins since 2018, 19 very actively, and really, I would say this past 12 months have seen the complete growth of stablecoins. First, maybe to answer the academic question you mentioned, which is what is a stablecoin? So, if I send to your listeners today a Bitcoin, they'll be very happy. But of course, we don't know what the price of that Bitcoin will be a week, a month, a year from now. If I send you a stable coin, it's basically a digital asset backed one-to-one by good old fiat money. The beauty of this, it's worth $1 today. It'll be worth $1 next week, next month, and next year. The beauty there is actually enables people to be able to use in the same way they use dollars on a day-to-day basis, but in a way that allows you to send payments cross-border instantaneously 24/7 at minimal fees compared to normal remittance services, for example. So as you said, stable coins have really taken off in the last couple of years. I mean, to use a data point that you quoted me, to quote it back, is basically at the beginning of COVID in January 2020, there was less than $5 billion in stable coins. Okay, this is January 2020. Fast forward 5 years later, we're over $250 billion in stablecoin assets and basically over $1 trillion a month of basically value being settled using a stablecoin. So it's actually quite impressive, the level of activity and velocity we are seeing with stablecoins. I would argue that in many cases, stablecoins have been that killer app that we have been talking in the crypto community for a long time. And now we have it actually via stablecoins where people are using it now on a day-to-day basis. You'll say, okay, this is great, but who is actually using stablecoins? So there's really, I would say, two or three kind of big market segments for stablecoins. One, probably the most typical example is, let's say, the retail user. If you're a normal person, you're living in Turkey, you're living in big parts of Africa, you're living in Asia, in many countries, and many of us are privileged to live in countries where we trust our central banks. Unfortunately, for a big chunk of the world, that is not the case. Ask anybody who lived in Turkey the last couple of years, or in Nigeria, or in Argentina, and the list goes on and on and on. Before, what they used to do, as soon as they would get paid in their local currency, they would go buy a motorcycle or an asset that they can hold, or good old dollars. But there's a limit of how many dollars you can stuff under your mattress, and especially how you can send them around the world. And this is why you're seeing a big use of stable coins in many parts of the world, from Venezuela to Turkey and beyond, basically. Also in the remittance space as well, a lot of people, when they're sending money around the world on a retail side, stable coins have been very useful. Now, the part that I think people underestimate is the second bucket, which is the B2B ecosystem. There's a large number of businesses around the world. Let's say you're a company in Malaysia doing business with a company, let's say in Ecuador. Yes, you can use the SWIFT system to send your payment in dollars, but of course, it's going to take you multiple days if it's not stopped in the interim. There's incredible fees. It's super non-user friendly. With stablecoin, between two parties that trust each other, they can do this payment for B2B transaction, again, seamlessly, instantaneously, and with minimum fees. I mean, to put things in perspective, over 40% of the transactions on Ethereum of Tether are over $1 million. And over 90% of stablecoin Tether transactions on Ethereum are over $100,000. So the image often people have, just people sending remittances, that's what stable coins are used, is actually incorrect. A lot of the payments transfers we're seeing as stable coins actually are quite a big amounts. So the first one bucket is the retail, second bucket is the B2B ecosystem, which is continuing to grow. Many of the OTC brokers you see, especially those that have associated with a bank, are able to generate quite a lot of fees because they're able to also ensure the off-ramp of those stable coins if one of the parties wishes so. The third bucket is the whole trading community. So today, if you look at crypto, any crypto exchange, most of the trading pairs that you see are denominated in USDT, for example, or USDC. So there's a big element in the trading world where people, when they enter the crypto ecosystem, sometimes, let's say when they're trading, they want to get risk off. In the same way in traditional markets, you may go to treasuries and T-bills and stuff like that. Here in crypto, you're able to stay in stable coins, get risk off, but still remain in the crypto ecosystem. So these are these three buckets that we're seeing, and there's many other use cases, but these are, I would say, three big buckets that we're seeing in the stable coin ecosystem. Now, why has it grown so much, Oriol? You can, ask your question. It went from 5 billion to 250 billion in 5 years. What happened? There's been a couple, I would say, significant differences, changes that happened that really changed the game. One of them, first of all, let's start with the simple ones. The stablecoin issuers themselves, Tether, Circle, First Digital, Paxos, and the list goes on and on, have definitely upped their game when it comes to transparency, providing proof of their reserves, for example, getting regulated, really becoming more institutional in a way that would give users, both retail or institutional, way more comfort in using them. That's really the case when it comes to these issuers. Second is the broader crypto ecosystem and the non-crypto ecosystem became more comfortable with stablecoins. I hear every day of transactions happening, not only in the crypto world, but in the art world, real estate world, and other B2B businesses where people are simply using stablecoins. So they have become, users have become more comfortable using them and actually using them for day-to-day activities. And number three is the big R, regulatory clarity, especially in the US. We've had over the last 2-3 years a number of regulatory initiatives. For example, in the Middle East, where I am right now, there's been numerous initiatives from the Central Bank of the UAE. In Hong Kong, where you are, there's been numerous great initiatives from the Hong Kong Central Bank, HKMA. But probably the big elephant in the room has been what's been happening in the US. For those who follow, for example, on my YouTube page, my social media, I've done a lot of videos on these. But for example, in the US, there was something called the Genius Act, which basically de facto made US dollar stable coins legal tender. What does that mean? There's a couple things. First of all, there's a very now clear regulatory regime, very comprehensive for any stable coin, US dollar stable coin issuer in the US. That's one, which is a big milestone. Second, the Genius Act basically de facto forces any single financial institution to accept stable coins over the next 3 years. And actually, stable coins are also considered as cash or cash equivalent from an accounting perspective and can even be used as margin on various derivative instruments. So I think there's been the Genius Act has acted as a massive catalyst globally for the adoption of stable coins. And this is one of the reasons you're seeing not only increased interest from financial institutions, but also from investors within stablecoins. And a good example has been the very successful IPO of Circle. It's not because Circle is a great company, because they also were very lucky on the timing wise with this piece of legislation that came in that generated a lot of enthusiasm from investors. You may say, why? Why are suddenly people, the government promoting the Genius Act? There's various ways you can look at this, whether you're cynical, whether you're pragmatic, but obviously there's been a lot of, in this current administration in the US, there's a lot of openness towards digital assets, but also as the US is trying to sell its debt to the rest of the world, especially in an environment where many are recalcitrant or having second doubts on the fiscal situation in the US, for example, stable coins, which are de facto backed by treasuries. Yes, sometimes it's cash, other cash equivalents, but mainly treasuries, creates a new market of people who are buying the US government debt. And this is one of the drivers as well why we're seeing such a big push from the US when it comes to stablecoins. One important caveat, I think, for your listeners, which is quite important, and it's something that I've covered on my YouTube page as well in the past, is that one big difference we have in the Genius Act is that it does not allow stablecoin issuers to offer yield. So right now, if you're a Tether, you're buying a USDT, which is Tether stablecoin, or you're buying USDC, which is Circle's US stablecoin, the yield basically goes to the issuer of the stablecoin. You're able to use USDC and USDT, send it around the world, but the yield goes to the issuer. The reason is many people said, hey, why can't we distribute this yield back to the users? Sounds like a very fair point, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's your money. But what you've seen with the Genius Act, this is explicitly banned. And the reason is there was a lot of lobbying from small banks, regional banks, and others against this. And you say, why are regional banks, for example, focus on this? And the reason is very simple. Imagine, Oriol, if today you have the chance to hold, let's say, $1,000 in stable coins and get interest on it paid directly from the stablecoin issuer, which is regulated, transparent, why would you leave your money in a bank? Where, by the way, the bank guarantees you only a certain amount. And by the way, banks operate on a fractional banking model, whereas the stablecoin issuer has a one-to-one backing for all the assets. The bank has anywhere from 10 to 20%, depending how you calculate your Basel ratios of the assets. Actually, the rest is being lent out in the typical money creation system of a bank. So in a way, you could argue that actually stablecoin issuer is safer. And this is one of the reasons banks are not stupid. They know this very well, that they knew if the stablecoin issuers could also offer yield, this could create a big run on the banks, especially the smaller banks, and could cause very serious systemic risk on these smaller banks. And second, even if it was not, people were not getting all their money out, the fact that some people were getting their money out would basically force these small banks to go borrow money on the wholesale market to lend it out to the retail market, and thus reduce their profitability, or what to call the net margin of the banks, but let's say reduce their profitability in short for this banking organization. So the stablecoin ecosystem has grown tremendously over the last couple of years. I really believe it's going to continue to grow over the next couple of years and decades, to the point that basically we're going to be doing banking transactions and it will be stable coins behind the scenes. We won't even realize it. Maybe one or two other points I think are quite important as well is where you are based, Oriol, in Hong Kong. I think we're going to see a lot of very interesting things with Hong Kong dollar stable coins and hopefully renminbi stable coins eventually as well. I think there's a whole segment of the market that will be looking at that. China made recently clear that they want to get into the stable coin ecosystem as well, for the same reasons that I just mentioned earlier. The US is doing it. There's a lot of benefits for China as well. Another fun fact for all of you based in Hong Kong, Tether was actually created in Hong Kong. We often forget that, but the entity that issues the USDT is actually a Hong Kong entity. So here you go, fun fact about what a Hong Kong connectivity and the history of stablecoins in the beautiful city of Hong Kong.
Well, thank you for this, Henry. I was actually going to ask you about stablecoins and traditional banks, but you already covered that pretty much. So one final question about stablecoins. Is related to how you think they will coexist with central bank digital currencies, because we all know that even though CBDCs are issued by a central bank, whereas stablecoins are not. There are like many areas in which they overlap. And we saw, for example, as you mentioned before, through this Genius Act, the US making de facto stablecoins become legal tender to some extent. So do you think that this rise of a stablecoin market will make more CBDC projects perhaps fail? Do you think they will kill CBDCs, or do you think they will coexist because they respond to different realities?
Yeah, very good question. So the interaction between stablecoins and CBDCs are quite an important one for a couple of reasons. One of them is, if you think about it, if users have given the choice between a stablecoin and a CBDC, the devil is out, or the jury is out on which one they will choose. I would argue that the outlook for CBDCs is not very good. And this is very interesting because 2-3 years ago, there was a lot of interest on CBDCs. I mean, over 95% of central banks, according to the Bank for International Settlements, were exploring or testing or piloting CBDCs, both either retail CBDCs or wholesale CBDCs. I think what's been happening now is CBDCs definitely are taking a step back because of the Genius Act. Because one of the things that happened with the Genius Act is another piece of legislation that passed, which basically forbids CBDCs in the US. So if you have the biggest economy today in 2025, it may be different in a couple of years, which is right now the US, is banning the use of CBDCs. It's going to create a lot of countries in the same ecosystem. Europe, for example, may not be very keen. And actually, case in point, there's a great report from the European Central Bank a couple of years ago that had showed that Europeans, if given the choice between convenience and privacy, rather take privacy. So actually, for many Europeans, the privacy is more, especially Germans, by the way, prefer having that. The problem with a CBDC is obviously government sees pretty much everything you're doing. Yes, governments will give you guarantees that they're not able to see and so on and so forth. But of course, there's a lot of actually oversight that can happen from a CBDC perspective, from a government perspective. But I think what we may see a new Cold War in CBDCs. You may have regions like North Americas, Europe that will not have a CBDC, but other parts of the world, Asia, Southeast Asia, the Middle East, where you could have a CBDC, or you probably actually will have a CBDC because these are countries where implementing one is actually easier when there's not the same constraints that exist in other countries. And the reason is because the benefits from a government, from a CBDC, are very, very strong. First of all, think about it. You're able to get live monitoring of the economy of a country. If everybody in Hong Kong, for example, is using a CBDC, the government can know immediately on the spot how much people are spending in the restaurants in Central, on the spot, right? No need to rely on GDP data that comes 1 or 2 months later. Frankly, it always makes me laugh that emerging markets, we even come up with a GDP number with a decimal. It shows that we have a great sense of humor with the estimates. But with a CBDC, you can have live data instantaneously on the spot that you can slice and dice. Second, it really puts an end to corruption with the use of money, right? So the old school idea that I'm going to go somewhere and give you an envelope full of cash, basically with a CBDC becomes impossible because it's traceable, right? Now, which is obviously a big priority in many parts of the world. The other big advantage of CBDCs, it makes money programmable. So imagine if I want to encourage the economy of Hong Kong, or let's say in Kowloon part of Hong Kong, I can give every resident of Kowloon, 5,000 Hong Kong dollars in CBDC, but they have 2 weeks to spend it. And if they don't spend it, I can pull it back. And this is something that actually CBDCs make it possible for actually central banks and policymakers to implement. So there's all these benefits, and there's many, many others that are so powerful that make it actually often a no-brainer if you're a central banker to have a CBDC. So I believe actually stablecoins and CBDCs will exist for some time. I would say in the last year, if these two were in a match against each other, definitely the CBDC has the central stable coins have won that match against the CBDCs. Could this change? Potentially, but I would say the momentum that stable coins have right now is very, very strong, and it will be difficult for CBDCs, at least at the global level, to try to actually turn things around. But I think it's very likely that for any of our listeners, the next 20, 30 years, we're going to see stablecoins and CBDCs coexist and cohabitate at different levels, depending on different countries of the world.
That's very interesting. And moving forward, I would like to ask you as well about another hot topic that has been actually, I mean, it has existed for years, but I would say also these last 2 years has become much more mainstream, and that one is asset tokenization. Last year, for example, I remember that it was a very hot topic on conferences like the Hong Kong FinTech Week and many other FinTech festivals, and
Correct.
everyone's talking about that. I know many banks are also working on projects on this area. So if you could please explain what's asset tokenization and more importantly, what's this hype about? I mean, what's going on? Why is it becoming so important?
Correct. So asset tokenization, real world assets, security tokens, tokenization, these we've used multiple terms over the years, but they're pretty much the same thing. And you're right, in the same way that stablecoins are having a renaissance moment, definitely it's the same as well for tokenization or RW, real world assets or security tokens, whatever you want to call it. Let's start first what it is, right? At the core, let's say, let's look at the building behind you, the IFC tower, right? I, as an individual, cannot go and buy IFC tower, right? But maybe I can go buy 1/10,000th of it. So what happens is a lot of the big assets that are illiquid and, for which there's illiquidity discount, tokenization allows them to put some liquidity in these otherwise illiquid assets. Real estate is probably the example that has been given multiple times over the years. And this not only has an economic purpose, like, for example, you can make an illiquid asset liquid, but also solves a lot of issues. I think about the social challenges in Hong Kong. I remember when I used to live in Hong Kong a couple of years ago, one of the reasons we've had this protest was because the average young person can never afford a house. And actually, by tokenization, you're not allowing people to buy a house, but at least they can get exposure to the real estate sector in ways that was not possible before, or very possible like in indirect ways, like with REITs and other products. So this actually really changes the dynamic on that perspective. This tokenization has been around for a long time. I've been wrong personally. You can find interviews with me on Bloomberg in 2018, 19, 2020, when I said this is the year of tokenization, security tokens will be a big thing this year. And I was completely wrong. I was actually 5-6 years too early, probably, on those predictions. This year has definitely been, the last 12 months, a big year for what now we're calling it mainly real world assets. And actually, I was also wrong. A couple of years ago, I was convinced this was going to happen via real estate. Convinced. Where ended up happening, the big hockey stick and the big killer app of tokenization started happening via actually government debt, treasuries, and that has been basically being put on the blockchain, tokenized, that are being used in DeFi and other crypto ecosystems, has become the killer app of tokenization, not real estate, by the way. So it's been very interesting how this is happening. And the users, they are, for example, crypto companies that want to stay on chain. They're able now to get exposure to, let's say, US treasuries, but via tokenized routes, where they're able to get the yield, but again, without leaving the crypto ecosystem. Now, there's been numerous challenges over the years. For example, what's the legal structure? How is it going to work? There's been numerous challenges over the years. For example, today, most tokenized assets, there's basically an SPV that is created, and that SPV is being tokenized, for example. And this is like the 1.0 of tokenization. But now what's very, very interesting is we are seeing that evolve and move forward. For example, where I'm based right now in Dubai, we've seen the government put literally land titles on the blockchain. So actually, it's not an SPV that holds a real estate piece of asset that is being tokenized. It's a land title itself that is tokenized. This means that if I'm selling you a house, you're able to see the land title on the blockchain. Whoop, the transfer moves to you, and it's basically happening directly there on chain. Basically, in theory, you could argue you don't need notaries anymore, and you don't need those intermediaries that come in the system anymore, at least from a transfer perspective. So it's been very remarkable what we have seen on the tokenization side. And I think while there's still a lot of excitement about tokenization, I really believe with the early days of it, and I think it's in the next couple of years, we're going to see pretty much everything be tokenized. Not only in like pieces like real estate treasuries, but stocks, bonds, everything basically can be tokenized and can be traded 24/7. So it really creates a whole new world of investable assets, but also gives access as well to people to assets in ways that was not possible before.
I see. And just in order to combine both, do you think that stable coins could become like a friction-free settlement layer for real-world assets? Do you think that will happen?
Oh, I think it's right now real world assets or tokenized assets are not being settled using fiat. They're 100% being settled using stable coins. So stable coins are powering the Web3 ecosystem, and any real world asset that is being tokenized is being settled in stable coins. So this is why we're seeing the continuous growth of the stablecoin ecosystem, and I think it's not going to stop on that perspective. The bigger question would be what's going to be the impact on the future of finance. And I mean, for some of your listeners who I do a lot of these things on my YouTube channel, on my newsletters, on my LinkedIn page. If you reflect, what's the impact this is going to have on the future of finance? We are moving to a world where it's going to be 24/7. There's no more Friday 5 o'clock markets close and we go home. And I think, and think about it, even how money value moves around the world. I find it still incredible that in 2025. If I want to do a bank transfer on Sunday, it doesn't work. I don't know. I never figured. Maybe my bank goes to church. I don't know why. But it's incredible that I'm not able to do a transfer in 2025. I think there's a massive disconnect between what these traditional financial institutions are doing and what users want. And forget even stable coins, forget even about asset tokenization. If you look at the stuff that is growing very quickly, DeFi, for example, decentralized finance, which is a delivery of financial services without any intermediaries. Literally now you have a financial system, but by the way, is growing by the day. It's over $150 billion right now. To put things in perspective, once again, at the beginning of COVID, it was less than $1 billion. And what we call total value lock. Now it's over 150 billion in less than 5 years. It allows you to basically do asset lending, borrowing, get yield, and whatever you need, basically 24/7. And most importantly, in a completely trustless system. There's no banker, there's no emails to send. All you need to trust is mathematics and smart contract code. And today, to put things in perspective, in the last couple of months, let's compare it with centralized exchanges, for example, DeFi exchanges, decentralized exchanges, where you're able to do the same things you're able to do on centralized exchanges, using stablecoins, by the way, as a backbone, are anywhere from 5 to 15% of volumes of centralized exchanges. You may say, oh, come on, it's still 10%, it's still nothing, But I remind everybody that I still remember the time where stablecoins were very, very small, nobody paid attention. And we've seen what's happening now. The same thing is going to happen to DeFi. And the beauty of DeFi doesn't care what your name is, doesn't care if you're a man or woman, doesn't care what you do, doesn't care how much money you have. It's completely trustless, decentralized, and most importantly, permissionless. I find that one of the biggest inequalities in the world today is that where you are born has the biggest impact on what financial services you can access. Think about somebody born today in Iran, somebody born in China and North Korea, and Libya, Lebanon, and the list goes on and on and on, Sudan, and big parts of Latin America. Somebody in Iran didn't choose their government, but why they're completely banned from the entire financial system. Same for Russia. If you want to sanction Vladimir Putin, it's very different from the millions of other Russians that have nothing to do with him, right? And I find it incredible that where you're born, where your nationality is from, has such a big limit on what financial services you can access. And I think this is something we're going to look back in 50 or 100 years and say, wow, this is crazy that we used to discriminate people on where they're from and where they're born. And the same way, by the way, today, we look at the discrimination against African Americans in the US or against women, that we didn't let women vote 57 years ago. So we're going to go through the same things in finance in 50 years or so and look back at this period and frankly be ashamed of how financial institutions treat their customers. And we're going to look back in like documentaries. I don't know how they'd be delivered back in the future at the era of banking right now and say, this is incredible how much discrimination was taking place.
Yes, I fully agree with you. And just before wrapping this up, like very quickly, I know that you started working as a lawyer, right? Same as myself. So, well, we've been talking about stable coins and real-world assets, and we all know that these areas touch on traditional finance infrastructure. You already mentioned before a bit about how stable coins are coexisting with traditional banks, but still, which areas do you think that require like the most regulations? Like, do you think, I mean, what parts uh, of these topics are the parts that you think that should be addressed first from a regulatory perspective? And I know this is a very wide question, but
Yeah, it's a very good question, Oriol. And this is something obviously I've been focused for many years now, because I think a couple of years ago, I've been now in the crypto ecosystem since 2014 and full time making a living out of it since 2016, right? And over the last, especially 2000, towards 2017, 18, I was a big advocate of regulatory clarity on crypto. And there was a big misconception. People thought, oh, crypto, they don't want rules, they want to avoid them, which is very untrue. All the crypto industry was asking was a clear regulatory framework that they could operate with and abide with and actually build their businesses. Um, and I'm happy to say that after all these years, you have now across the world, the rules may not be perfect, but you have by and large reasonable regulations. We're having in the US now, Europe has MiCA, Middle East, what's happening in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, for example, are a great example. In Hong Kong, what the SEC has done, it may not be perfect what the SFC has done, but actually it's a step in the right direction. Probably a bit too slow, but it is what it is. So I think the benefit there is that there's now by and large, reasonable regulatory frameworks for crypto. Now, there's been just tremendous work to be done. For example, how transaction monitoring is taking place, how we are dealing wallet screening, how we're conducting even KYC, enhanced DD, what risk parameters we're putting. There's a big gap between what the crypto industry needs and what the industry is providing today. For example, I chaired the board of a company called A6 Compliance, which is the world's biggest crypto specialized compliance services provider, right? And the reason that company is so successful because they focus on the crypto industry and provide services specific to the crypto industry by people who understand it, for people who actually live and breathe that every day. So I think there's going to be not only changes are needed on the regulatory rules, but also how we approach crypto as well. For example, unlike, I always say half jokingly that if you're a criminal and you want to launder money, you should not be using Bitcoin. You will get caught. You're probably better off using a traditional bank, using real estate, art, all the good old offshore companies, all the stuff that exists for already many decades. Actually, crypto is very, very traceable. So I think there's going to be there's a lot of features of digital assets that can be maximized. But the goal is not to do risk avoidance. The idea is to do risk management. We're all in the business of risk management, taking the decisions that we believe are the best. But I think there needs to be often a mindset shift from not only regulators, which is happening already, but also a lot of practitioners as well. But the most important item here, Oriol, is education, because whether you're a regulator, you're a compliance professional, you're an executive, you may love Bitcoin, you may hate Bitcoin, you may love crypto, you may hate crypto, but the most important thing is to at least understand it. I truly believe it's a fiduciary duty to at least understand what digital assets are and work. It's gone better. I mean, I spent years of my life creating educational videos on my YouTube page. I have adult books, I have books for kids, even to teach them about crypto. I teach in Hong Kong the world's first crypto university course in 2015. I have a lot of online content in my social media because I truly believe it's important. And I think once you understand it, then you can make an educated decision, whether you love it or hate it. But I think, unfortunately, a lot of people disregard crypto, saying, it's just like money laundering thing, and they completely walk away from it, which I think is a big mistake. I'm very pleased to see how this is changing now globally. But like anything else in life, there's a lot of work to be done on the education front.
I fully agree, Henry. I think, as you said, that getting education in this area is actually very important now because we are talking about the future of money, which is a topic about like an expression that I know that you use a lot, no, this expression of a future of money. So I think this is what we're talking about right here. So it's important to know about that. And well, unfortunately, we are running out of time, but I must say it's been an absolute pleasure, Henry, to be able to speak with you again. I'm sure again that my audience will have learned a lot from you regarding these two topics. We could be talking for hours about these and other topics, but I think that just as a small introduction, I'm sure that all my listeners will be very happy.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and happy to be interacting with any of your viewers. Like I mentioned, I have a YouTube page, my LinkedIn page, social media. I'm always Twitter. It's all my name, Henri Arslanian. Henri with an I, the French way, and is there. And I'm very happy to. Very happy. Thanks for Oriol for letting me share my passion for the future of crypto and the future of money with your listeners. And keep up the great work you're doing, by the way, with the podcast. It's great work you're doing in bringing more clarity, education, and awareness in this fast-moving space.
Thank you very much, Henry. And to all my listeners, feel free, please, to follow Henry as well if you don't do it, because you will learn a lot from all his videos and crypto capsules and everything he's posting. And well, thank you very much for watching this episode, and please stay tuned for the next ones.